Hello everyone, we are live. I hope you are very well today and welcome to VueMontréal community. Thanks for joining us today. I apologize for Tommy who can't be here tonight, but he will be here for the next one. And before we start, I just want to let you know, today if you have any question, ask it on the chat, so I will highlight it for the speaker and it will appear just here on the screen. Okay. And so to start, our speaker today is a full stack developer. He is involved a lot in VueMontréal, and today is his third meetup at VueMontréal. Welcome, Stéphane Reiss. Yeah. Welcome, Stéphane.
Thank you, Florent. That was quite a nice intro, huh?
Yes.
I really liked the
I should do it like a boxer.
Very professional.
So tell us about what you will speak today.
Yes, I'm going to share my screen. Tonight, we're going to talk about renderless components.
Okay.
Share my screen. Thank you all for joining. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how many people join. I don't have a view on how many people are.
15, near 20.
15?
Yes.
Cool. Yes. So yeah, tonight I'm going to talk about renderless components. I consider it an advanced view pattern, but you'll see it's very simple to use them. I discovered them at a Vue conference, Vue Toronto conference 2 years ago. There was this talk from Adam Wadan, who presented the concept, and since then I use them a lot whenever I can. It's really a nice pattern. So let me first introduce myself. I'm a web developer. I have a background, backend background, but I really love JavaScript, and I do most of my work in front end these days. I'm also a big fan of Magic the Gathering, the card game, and I really love Arduinos and Legos. And sometimes I combine all of them into like personal projects, fun projects. Today, like I said, we're going to talk about renderless components. So first, I'm going to explain what it is, some example you can find, some libraries online that use this concept that you can find, and then we're going to do a workshop. It's not really a workshop. It's going to be me coding live, concrete example. One thing I've noticed online is there is some documentation, some useful and great articles about renderless components, but it's often based on library code. Like when you want to write a library, you would use that pattern to improve the maintainability of the code. But the workshop and the code example I'm going to show you is on an application for an event management system. What I mean is you can use renderless components even though you don't build a new library in Vue.js. And I also must say that, like I mentioned 2 years ago, Adam Wadan presented at the Vue Toronto, VueConf Toronto, and he wrote this blog post here. I've posted the link, which summarize pretty nicely also what are renderless components. So go check it. It's well written and very useful information. And yeah, like Florent said, if you have any questions, post it on the chat in YouTube, and Florent will moderate the questions, and I'll answer them as soon as possible. What is a renderless component? It's basically a component that doesn't render anything. It's not quite true. I'll explain the details in a moment, but basically they rely on scope slots. And scope slots, what it is basically a slot, a basic slot, where you can provide props. Okay, so you see the difference here, where this div here is rendered on the default slot of the renderless components. And to make it a scoped slot, you basically just provide some props from these components to your slot content here, and ta-da, it becomes a scoped slot. And when I say components that don't render anything, that's not quite true, because you'll see later, but basically it renders whatever you put in the default slot. Okay, so renderless components, they don't have a template, only script tags, but they do render something that the parent component will provide. And I found two examples of renderless components. So before jumping into the code, renderless components aim to write components in a way that is maintainable and that you can abstract the templating, the UI, I would say, from the business logic, from the actual user interaction. Here, I have a tags input. This is from the blog post. I put it the link before, and when you have on the left tag input where you can enter new tags basically, and if you need to change the UI for that component at some point, and you prefer to have it in a different design like this, where you have your tags a list and the remove button is not a small icon here, it's a remove button and you can remove them. How do you create a component that can manage and handle both design without sacrificing the code maintainability? You could have in the same component like a big if you pass this prop, you render that like the design on the right, otherwise the design on the left. But it gets complicated over time, especially if you want to introduce a third layout, which is totally different from those two, right? So how do you keep the functionalities, which are when I type enter, I add the tag. I can do both the same thing on both sides. When I click here, I remove the tag. When I click here, I remove the tag. So how do you keep that interaction? Well, the solution is renderless components. The renderless tags inputs is only 41 lines of code. And if we look at this piece of code here, you can see that it has a render function, okay, and it only returns the default slot here. But we pass some components, some attributes, some objects here, and all those attributes are available on the child component, okay. And we have a bunch of other we have methods here and data, and so I'll pass over this one very quickly. But again, go check this blog post here, very interesting. Another example I find very useful, view promised. Okay, this is a component, a renderless component that helps you deal with promises states in templates. Okay, again, go check the source code, very useful. I really love this this plugin. I use it a lot. Each time I need to do stuff with promises like backend calls, Ajax calls, and so on. And basically, on the left, you see the code, your component without the library, the view promised component here. So basically, you have in your template here, if, okay, let's go here on the created method, we fetch the users, and fetch users is a method that will call the backend. You often want to display a spinner loading states, and you also want to display errors when the backend call as an error. And to do that, you need to keep all those data attributes in your component state, which is not efficient, especially if this is one component and you have another component that does the same backend call, and then you need to copy over the is loading, is delay, elapse, and all those attributes on the other components. Now with view promised, it transformed all this code into much less code, basically. So you have the promised component, which is the renderless component here. You pass an attribute, the promise, and this promised attribute will provide few templates, few slots, sorry. The pending slot, the default slot here, and the rejected slot. Based on the state of the promise, it will render either this one, or this one. I see a question here, but renderless component is creating another instance of view. I'm not sure I understand, but no, it doesn't create another instance. It creates an instance of this view component. So it's the same way as if you were using parent-child components, basically. Renderless only means that there is no template. Okay. So when you create when you fetch the users, basically, this, we can assume it returns a promise, okay? And we pass it to the promised component. And then the promised component provide the different slots here. That's a good question. Aren't renderless component pretty much made obsolete by composable? I assume you mean the composition API that comes with Vue 3. I'm going to talk about it at the end. Any more questions before I move on to the workshop? I'm going to code a renderless component with you here, and it's going to be based on the calendar events application. So you can see here a small screenshot of how the app looks like, and we're going to create a few pages and see how we can refactor code using renderless components. You don't have to take notes. The code I'm going to share is available on my GitHub here, and I've made all the commits here, and I'll actually start the workshop exercise from this commit here. Okay, let's go. So I'm going to start the app. Okay. So the app is pretty straightforward, very small app. We have the main component here, which is basically just a link and router view, some style. And the calendar view here, I used Full Calendar, which is a nice plugin to display events on a calendar design here. So what I do is, when the component gets created, I'm going to fetch events. Here I simulate a backend call, but it's just a set timeout, and I fetch the events. I get the events from this list here, hard-coded list. Okay. And the template is pretty straightforward. It's just a full calendar component with the options. So I set the initial dates to this, and I'm going to use the time grid plugin. So that's pretty much all there is in this setup. So first thing I'd like to do is create a new tab, a new page, to get the same list of events, but in a different with a different design. Okay, I want a list of events in the calendar. Okay. So we're going to create this new component called event list. You here it event list. Cool. And have a template. Okay. Okay, I'm going to add this component to the header. And I'm going to create new rows in the router version. So it's recorded here. Okay. And I'm going to import event.js. I have this new route. And there, why is that? Because I didn't save here. Okay. So I have my component that renders. So what I'm going to do here, same thing. I'm going to fetch the event, import events. I'm going to keep a local copy here. So I'm going to return attribute events empty by default. And on the created method, I'm going to do the same way, the same as the calendar component here. So again, it's just to simulate the events are not fetched. That there is the backend call to fetch the events. If I have the events, I can just put them in a list. This. So it's a for event in events. Key, event title, and we're going to display just the event title here. Okay, so that's pretty much it. We have the list of events. And also more pretty by adding an image. Placeholder, placeholder it 50 by 50. Cool. And yes, great. And some CSS. So for the CSS, I'm going to cheat. I prepared all that already, so I'm just going to copy paste. If you don't mind. And I'm going to put the class event here, and it's going to look better. Okay, refresh. Okay, much nicer here. Cool. So you might start seeing a pattern here where this is duplicated code from here. Let's add another feature before moving to renderless components. I want to display a loading state. So while we fetch the events, I want to display a nice loader. And for that, I'm going to use a spinner from viewSpinner. I'm going to import the, I think it's the scale loader from viewSpinner. And I don't remember, so again, quickly here and take that one here. Okay, so it's the scale loader. So register the component. It's available in templates. And now I can say, here I'm going to display scale loader, the if only when the component is loading, actually when it's fetching events. So loading, I'm going to give an attribute for that. Else otherwise create the display the list. So here I need to keep track of the is loading state by default false. And here on the created hook, before fetching the events, is loading is true because we're loading the events, and after is loading is false. Cool. Save. And now if I refresh, once again display the loader. After that, I have the list of events. Where it gets interesting is that now I want to do the same on the calendar view here. So I could just copy paste the code. Actually, that's what I do, and then we're gonna factor with renderless components. But you can see already that it's not very efficient, and if the loader you want to change it to something else later, becomes complicated. I'm gonna get rid of the div. I don't need the div here, just like this. Say the else. It's loading false, and I need to set it to true, to false again when I fetch the event, and I need to register this thing here. Save, all good, no errors. Render the loader here on both sides. So like I said, duplicated code on both components. How do we refactor that with the renderless component? Let's create the renderless component. I'm going to call it with events. As a standard, I like to prefix my renderless component with the keyword with, so I know it's a renderless component. And here I need to do view, save. So with event, the component that will provide me events. So it doesn't have a template, only a script tag. Name it with events, this. And all I need is a render function that return scope the default slot. Scope slot default, and that's pretty much it. I have a renderless component. It doesn't render anything. Now let's start using it in event lists. You can import it with events from object and put it in the templates. So like this. So what it does basically, and I'm going to save, cool. Because it renders the default slot here, everything that I put here is just basically rendered. If I look at the UI, as you can see, it's transparent. The UI renders the same as before. If we look at the logs, if we inspect with the View plugin here, you can see that with events is the component that renders all that, but it doesn't have data. It doesn't have anything. Well, data here is from View router. Okay, cool. Now, how can we leverage this renderless component to improve the code here? Well, we can provide anything. Oops, I lost my. Okay, I lost my audio. Won't be long. Okay, it's back. Sorry about that. Okay, so sorry, I have problems with my phones. I'm gonna switch.
I think we can hear you.
Oh, I think it's my Bluetooth. Okay, wait a minute.
It's okay. I will do the music during the escalade.
The intro. Yeah, you can put
yes.
it back. At the end of the conference, you can vote for Florent performance.
Oh, thanks.
Okay, that's.
You're back.
Yes, cool. I'm back. Sorry. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, you can provide attributes, function, methods to a slot to make it a scoped slot. So we're going to provide events here. This.events, but this.events doesn't exist yet, so I need to put it as an attribute here. Events. Oops, I need to return perfect. Cool. So event default. And the renderless component has the same hooks as other components, so I'm going to again simulate the backend call on the created hook here, like this. I'm also going to provide the isLoading state. I'm going to get components, so I need to import the event from events. Right. Here is loading. Also set the isLoading to false. Okay, cool. So now that I provide the events in the slot, I can use them here with the slot. And you have access to all the properties that your component pass to the slot and make the events. Cool. And I'm also, before showing you in the UI, I'm going to also provide the loading state. It's loading.
Just before you continue, we have a question from Catherine. Sorry, I can't say it. I never seen the with convention used in Vue, but I have seen it in React. Is that where you have borrowed it from?
Good question. I don't remember, honestly. So I think it was from the VueConf Toronto talk from Adam Watan 2 years ago. The example he showed was with prefix, and I liked it, so I kept it. But he probably also borrowed it from React. I don't know where it comes from, but okay. So I passed the isLoading attributes as well here. So I can also access isLoading here. And that means here in the context of the scope slot, isLoading refers to this version, to this variable here. And same for events here refers to this one. So that means I can get rid of all this code. I don't need to manage the state of events or the loading states. I can just remove all that. I don't need anything from here. And now my event list component is not even aware of events, right? It's the job of the with events component to just fetch the events, provide the states, and the functionalities. So refresh, still nothing changed. I can see my events after a second. And now if you look at the logs, the inspector here, I think yeah. Now with events, manage the states of events. Great. So I reduced the amount of code here. Actually, I moved it to with events, but now I can reduce the total amount of code of my app because I can do the same on the calendar side. And I can do something similar as the event list here, where I'm just going to use with events, fetch the events. Like this. And now I need to just import events. With events like this. And same thing here. I don't need to manage local state of events or isLoading. I can just simplify the code. Something wrong. Events not. Well, yeah. Events is defined but not used. So same thing here. I still see my events, but the code is much more simpler on both components, because to fetch the events, it's in my renderless components. So now if you need to change the backend or add more functionalities, you can just do it in with events, and all the different components that renders the events, they are aware of all that. Any questions so far? I'm going to look at the chats quickly. No? OK. Let's keep going then. I want now, when clicking on an event, I want to subscribe to the event. So provide a subscribe functionality. As a user, I go on the app, and when I click event 1, I want to subscribe, fill in a form or whatever. I want to be able to say, I'm going to this event. Do we do that? Well, the initial method would be to say on click, subscribe, call a method that will get the event, and then you have all your code here. You call to the backend. So method.
Okay, until you write the method, I will just read the question from Eric Ledonge. Are you still able to play with your UI component in Storybook with this technique?
Yes, as long as your UI component use the renderless component, it will render. If in Storybook you have event list or calendar here, it will render like this, right? So it's not different. Renderless components are not different than any other components. It's just they don't have a template, right? So that said, if you want to put with events in Storybook, it doesn't have a UI. So it's going to be complicated to provide a story for that in Storybook.
But maybe just to add the question, maybe what do you do with the API call? So because in Storybook you just want some UI, do you cut the API or do you do something like this?
Well, then it's a bit outside of the scope of renderless components. You can either mock the call to the backend in Storybook, or you don't rely on the renderless component in your Storybook. For instance, here, this is my UI component here, calendar, right? But with events, doesn't have a UI. So I can as well just remove all that and use my events from manage the state here. Not sure it will work because you would have calendar.view in Storybook, which depend on with events. Good question.
Yeah, but basically in Storybook, you will just put your UI component. If you have any logic like this, you will not show it on Storybook.
Yes, I would say mock the API call when you can. Okay. So going back to the subscribe feature. So I want to be able to subscribe to an event. So I have a method here called subscribe that gets the event. And I'm just going to say subscribe to and the title of the event here like this. Cool. So that would work. Okay. Yes, links. Cool. When I go there and I click an event, I subscribe to the event. Now, same problem as before, because the subscribe is in the event list. When I want to do the same thing on the calendar, you start to have to duplicate the method in both. So you can do that logic in the renderless component. Because with attributes, you can also expose methods. I'm going to move the method here in my renderless component. And all you have to do to expose it is like this: subscribe is subscribe. You can even expose it with a different name, like subscribe function or subscribe, whatever the name is. So I'm going to just call it subscribe here. And here, I just access the subscribe method like this. Now I can remove, or I removed it already. Now here, this function refers to this one, this object here. Refresh, I'm going to refresh the page here. I click, I subscribe to the event. As simple as that. Let's do the same thing on the calendar view. So I have access to the subscribe method, so I can say subscribe, and here the option for full calendar, I think it's event click, I think, and you need to provide a function that will get the event, and you just call subscribe, and I think it will be dot events. I can syntax in a minute. Just want to make sure. Oh yeah, right. Cool. So now both on the calendar, here I can, when I click, I can subscribe to the event, either opening a modal or calling the backend, and also here I can do things here. And the subscribe method is managed by the renderless component, the with events components here. Here, this is a small trick to pass the event instead of the JavaScript native event, because if I remove that, you'll see that actually I can log quickly. So calendar event does much more than just the event data. Oops. Also, wait, what? Not sure what's going on. Okay. This. Yeah. Okay. Never mind. I think that's pretty much all I have for today for renderless components. I went much more further on the GitHub repository. For instance, I haven't talked about renderless component that can accept props, but here you could say there is a prop called category, and you want only the Vue.js attributes, Vue.js events. So you could say Vue.js. And this is a prop of the component. Like any other component, here you would have a props key, and then based on that value, when you fetch, you pass that data to the backend, and so on. And it's reactive, so when the category change here, it would just react to that and update the UI accordingly. I'm going to show you an example in the repo in a minute. So there is a question here. When do you decide to extract this functionality to their own renderless components? That's a good question. It's going to depend a lot on the context of your application. Okay, I would say when you start seeing some common functionality between two components, especially with those backend calls, like you need to fetch data from the backend, and that data is needed by different components, maybe that's the time to go with renderless components. Okay. Yeah, I hope it answers the questions. Renderless components, like I mentioned at the very beginning, are also often used in libraries when you want to provide a library that consumer can change the layout, the UI without with all the functionalities, all the JavaScript code available, like the tags example. You want to just change the UI but keep the user interaction. That's also the time for renderless components. So again, in my repository, I went a bit further, but you can track the commits. I made the exact same. What I show you is basically the commit history you can find on the repository. And when you add props to the renderless component here, it looks like this. Very quickly, you can add a category, like I mentioned, on the event list, and then have a computed property to filter events based on that category. So here, instead of returning the full list of events, I return the filtered list. As you can see here, I added a category key for each event. And based on the prop value, the category here, I just do a filter, basically. And I even went with the third view. I'm going to show you that. So we currently only have 2 views, but if you want to add another one, so I'm going to check out that and check out here. And PNCI, and I'm going to refresh. And it's as simple as creating a new component and use the with events component, and pretty straightforward. While it's loading, I'll show you the code. So I just added a carousel here, and this is the third view, and not a lot of code, because again, I rely on the renderless component with event here. Same thing here. events is loading, and I display in a carousel. So I'm able to quickly restart here. So I'm able to quickly change my UI while keeping my functionality. Check out. Okay, so I'll stop trying because basically, and let's try. Let's go on the main branch. All I'm gonna need that. Is cool. So while it's installing, do you have any questions? I'm gonna look at the comments. Okay, no comments, no questions so far. Cool. Observe and refresh. So this is how it looks like. I added the category here. You can see it's reactive. I changed the category, and with events, which has the computed property, will react to the change of its prop and provide only the events, the relevant events. And the carousel view like this. And you have the different events here. Sorry for the CSS. I'm not a CSS. I'm a CSS developer, so it looks like this. That's all I have for the workshop. Let's go back to the presentation. Oh yeah, I haven't talked about tests. Didn't have time. But again, on the repo, my last commit is about tests. How do you test renderless components, right? So okay, there is a lot of code to just set up the jest and other things, but basically this is the test file. So you would import your renderless components. I use view test util to mount the component. I have some mock events here, and I did 3 tests. The first one is I test the is loading states. So before each test, I'm going to mount my renderless component, and I'm going to provide a scoped slot, because you cannot test the renderless component like this. You need to provide some content so it renders something. And in my case, all I render is data. All the props available that the renderless component provides, I'm just going to put them here in the template. Okay. So the first test is, while fetching events, I want isLoading to be true. And I use fake timers, so the set timeout set in the with events is stopped, so it will never succeed, finished. So the test is just asserting that the text in my renderless component, actually in my component, will be JSON like this. And then isLoading should be false when I'm done fetching the events. Okay, and this is how we do it here, by just saying, oh, just run all the timers, and I'm going to wait for Vue to update the templates in order to have the isLoading to false. And same for the subscribe method. I need to provide a span, a DOM element, where when I click it, I get a call to the subscribe event, like this.
Okay, I just had a question from me.
Yes.
Because I think you can't see it anymore. It's pretty cool to use the scopes like this with the weave, but it's something I don't see a lot in project I work with. Maybe a cause would be that it's not really easy to use for the beginners. What do you think about it?
Good question. I'm gonna drink some water while thinking about the answer. Yes, I think you're right. I would say maybe one is because it's not a well-known pattern, and it seems advanced, but not that much. And maybe, but if we say it's just a pattern as a parent-child components, it would be more mainstream. The other thing is online. When I was looking at renderless components, a lot of articles, I haven't found a concrete example within an application. It's always about if you want to author a library, like you want to provide some library, like, I don't know, UI library, design system libraries or whatever, then it's a good thing to code with renderless components. But when you have an application, SPA or whatever your project is, it's hard to get your head around when do you use it, right? So yeah, I don't know if I answered the question.
Yes, sure. And I remember a question, maybe it will be for the next, from Catherine about renderless components. Are they obsolete by the composable API?
That's a great question, and I'm very glad someone asked it, because I'm ready to answer that question, but not today. It's going to be part of a talk I'll do at the next World Youth Summit. It's a Friday, October 2nd, and I'm going to answer that question. So if you have an opinion, feel free to reach out to me. I already have the answer to that question. And I'm going to explore the same format as I've done today. I'm going to do the same thing at World Youth Summit with the composition API. So you'll have the answer in a month. Thank you all. I hope you enjoyed this meetup. If you have any question, let me know now or later. I'm on the Slack, Vue Montreal Slack channel. And thank you for joining us today.
All right. Thank you, Stéphane. And thank you, everyone. I will just let 2 minutes if people have questions. And during that time, I will just say thank you to you first. And like you said, come and join us on Vue Montreal Slack. We have our website, vuemontreal.org, our LinkedIn. And do I forgot something? I don't think. And the GitHub and the slide will be available on the event page on our website that I will give to you immediately as soon as the meetup is finished. And you can all applause yes, Stéphane for his nomination for the Vue World Summit. That is very cool. We are very happy for him.
Thank you.
And that's it. People, do you have questions? We'll let you some minutes before say thanks and bye-bye.
I'm curious. Sorry to cut you. I'm curious in the audience. I don't know how many people are listening to the stream, but have any of you used renderless components or at least know the pattern? I'm gonna wait in the comments to see if people either use it or I've seen some code.
For my part, I don't use it a lot. I just use the basic one you show us, like the Vue Promise.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, it's not the first pattern I will think about.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why. Okay.
Rob. Rob is working with me, so.
Yeah. Doesn't count. Okay.
Yeah, so where we work at iCare and we use the renderless component a lot. I'm a big fan of them. Ryan, use them. Nice, Adam's advanced Vue course. Yes. So Adam Wadden has so there is the blog post online, but he also I think he has courses I don't remember on which platform. I don't think it's View Mastery, it's somewhere else.
View School?
Maybe View School. I don't know if it's this one or another one. Anyway, he has this great workshop, and you go more in details than what I've done, and it's very useful. So for next meetup or in the Vue Montreal Slack channel, if you start using on renderless component, just tell us, and we'll be happy to say, yeah.
Yes, you have to tell us. I don't remember what I wanted to say before. I think we are pretty done. What do you think? How do you feel, Stéphane? Yes, the question. How do you feel about the Vue World Summit? Because it will be with a lot of people.
I'm really excited about that. Also a bit nervous, yeah. But I think today this meetup was a kind of a rehearsal for the next one. So yeah. Smaller audience, local people that I know, and no trick questions from what I've seen. So thank you.
The best audience at Vite Montreal.
Yes. And if you like the format, the workshop format or live coding format, let me know. I'm going to use the same at the World View Summit.
All right, so we are done for today. Thank you, Stéphane. Thank you, everyone. That's it for Vue Montreal. The next meetup, we have no idea because we want to, Stéphane, focus on the Vue World Summit. And we have no one for now. So if you have any idea for meetup, etc., don't hesitate to tell us, and we will work with you to make it happen. So thank you, everyone. Good night. Last word, Stéphane, before ending the stream.
Thank you all for joining, and thank you all for using Vue, I guess.
Yes, make Vue great. Better than something else.
Bye all.
Bye everyone. Ciao.